Today's guest is Sean Languedoc, CEO of Outforce.ai. This is one of those conversations that a lot of people in startups who are constantly behind schedule, constantly over budget, in particular with the development of a software product, really are going to want to listen to. Especially because when building a business like that, inflection points are going to be inevitable. And what do you do when you need to scale up? And how do you best optimize to take most advantage of the new talent that you bring in to try to meet that demand? Or as Sean calls it, elastic demand. While we cover and answer those questions in this conversation also gets to borrow from a 5-time founder, entrepreneur, and one who regularly mentors other founders now, and really has a keen eye for go-to-market strategy. Fundamentally, if you're an entrepreneur in general, you're going to really benefit from listening to this conversation because of the nature of Sean as an entrepreneur and how it is he is efficient with his questions when looking to solve problems. So if this has piqued your interest, which I hope it has, if you're an entrepreneur, you're always looking to learn from other entrepreneurs. Without further ado, here's Sean. Sean, my man, it is good to have you here. We've had
Thank you,
some
Phillip. It's
time.
great to be here.
Yeah. No, look, we've had some time to get acquainted, and we narrowed it down. We do believe there is an important discussion to be had here. And I was mulling over when I was looking over my notes, like, where do I start? Where do I get this conversation going? Now, you're a serial entrepreneur, and while many try to take the title, not many live to say it later when you're mentoring other entrepreneurs day to day, right? You're highly involved, constantly working. And so for me, I think what is always fascinating is, what do you do when you're not explicitly working? Like, how do you spend? I think this is important. Like, if I had to put it in a question, like, over 25 years of being in tech, like, what's a non-tech hobby that has actually informed your tech work?
I would say the hardest thing that I work on is communication skills, interpersonal communication skills, connection. People, you can really tell the greenhorns when they come out and they blab about product. Nobody wants to know about product. Product's a commodity. It's, obviously it's, what are you going to do for me is always helpful, but really making interpersonal connections, especially in an era of technology where those connections are lost through media. And so I'd say that's what I work on the most. I work with coaches and I work with other podcasters who are really good at establishing connection. Yeah. That's what I do.
I think it's awesome to hear someone in a position of leadership actually emphasizing how important communication is, especially when doing the kind of work you do, which involves like bringing talent, not only internally, but like externally to other companies as sort of the byproduct of how it is you're in business right now. You've been in multiple different companies, but in particular, what I find fascinating and what's timely for now is that outsourcing your talent isn't something that everyone has a lot of confidence in. They think everything has to be internal, right? And especially in tech, this is something that's written all over your website, right? With what you're doing with Outforce.ai, but especially in tech, it can get expensive super, super fast.
Oh, yeah.
And I think if I read the notes right, no one knows this more than you. And it's the whole reason you even started your company was I imagine you spent a lot of money on the wrong people, getting nowhere fast. Can you sort of tell me probably the most relevant point in your business entrepreneurial career where you just took a look at the talent that was around you, the people you invested in, and many people will try to blame the talent per se, but at the end of the day, you as a leader hired the people, brought the people in. So can you sort of take us to that moment? I know there's not ever one pivotal moment.
One moment, many? How about that?
But can you take us to a time where it really became clear to you and enough was enough?
Well, that happens a lot in companies as they go through transitions as well, right? It's not like it's just, when you're starting a company, you look for, I'm a sales founder. I'm founder-led sales all the way through to building the team and then getting the product market fit, and then we get into scale. And when you transition to scale, sometimes you need a different engineering resource to lead that than the one who bootstrapped your company together. And I see that a lot in our clients where you have a technical reboot because you're scrapping together a few bucks, you build a product, you throw it out there. Client says yes if it has that. You build that. Next client says yes if it has that. You copy and build to the next one. And the next thing you know, you got a bunch of code that's just you end up with what's called technical debt that is actually so big that you can't add anything else. You're spending more time fixing than you are building. And at that point, you have to transition out. And usually, it's quick load up software like a Ruby on Rails kind of thing that gets you into the trouble. And you need to move to more scalable technologies. And sometimes the people that got you to that product market fit aren't the people who are going to lead a larger engineering team. So those are kinds of transitions companies go through. And sometimes they are, but sometimes a firefighter is not going to build a massive office building kind of thing, right? That's where you got to look at and see whether those are the right people. And then in my case, I was lucky. I've had really great engineering leads in each of my companies, but the problem was scalability in a quick manner. So you need to we had to do a show. We had to get the product ready for the show, the trade show. Boom, you need engineering capacity for a short term. Or you get a new client who loves the product, but yeah, we needed to have this, and the other thing. And that's going to be bespoke to that client, or it's a front end or an API specific to a client's needs. You don't need those engineers for a long time, but you need them to understand your business. You need them to understand your tech stack, obviously, so that they are quick to build. And that's where the challenge lies, is finding that right fitting outsourced organization that has built what you're building or something similar to it, that they can hit the ground running. And it's the opposite problem of hiring an engineer. Hiring an engineer is hard, takes time. And there's an onboarding process, and you got still a 50% chance of success or failure in that. Outsourcing, it's like taking your kid to the daycare for the first time, right? Like you don't want to give that to just anybody. So you go to, hey, Phil, do you own anybody? And have you had a good experience? Well, you're in media tech and I'm in health tech. So your people wouldn't necessarily be knowing about my business, but they'd be good. And if they're good, even if they knew health tech and they're good, probably their best engineers are already booked out to other clients. So what am I doing? Just kicking the can down the road. So then the next thing you do is you go online and you look at, hey, I hear Ukraine's really good, or I hear wherever is great. And now, guess what? There's 1,600 companies in Ukraine alone. Where do you start, right? It's like saying I want to build a hockey team. Well, I'm a Canadian, but I ski. I don't play hockey. So it's water everywhere, but not a drop to drink. And unfortunately, water is being spouted into your inbox every day with unsolicited offers. And so you talk to the head of one of those companies, and you hear everything you want to hear because that's what they're good at selling. But then when it's delivery, they don't know your business. They bring in junior engineers who don't know what they're doing, and you go through the same thing every entrepreneur goes through: the trough of despair. You heard the pitch, you're excited about when these people start, and then 2 sprints in and you're going, oh my gosh, what have I just done? And then you either rip the cord and start over again, which means you've wasted months because it took you months to find the right one, or you keep pushing through and just suffer it. And that is what I've experienced personally. And I didn't want that to happen to anyone else. So I built the company to solve that problem.
Now, did you tell anybody about when you were building this in your network of people who used to maybe refer people to you, that you were in health tech, media tech? Hey, you know what? I'm thinking of actually doing this. And what was their feedback? Because often, depending on who the entrepreneur is, they'll talk about what they're about to build because they see it's a real problem, right? And
Right.
and you start getting in this traction, and then there are people who you really trust and believe in. And as a mentor, I feel like you probably hear this all the time, but there's people who you trust and believe in, and the first thing you do is go, I don't know, man, that's not. Did you get any kind of resistance from the most trusted people in your circle, and how did you navigate that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So this company is two pivots, is in its third pivot, just so
Wow.
you know. Yeah, it started off as a side of the desk. I was building another company in the city of Calgary, and I was trying to help the community import companies and talent. And Trump had come in and the H1, and he was going after immigration, right? First the Syrian and sorry, the Muslim countries. And guess what? Some of the greatest mathematicians and algorithm writers in the world come from Syria and Iran. And so those people weren't feeling too comfortable in the United States. So I went down and pulled those people into Canada. Canada's a really fast immigration program for high tech workers. So got those up and then built teams around them for companies like Facebook and Apple, and it was just side of the desk stuff. And then he went after H1Bs, which is basically mostly tech workers, largely from India. And there's thousands of them who have been there for 20 years and just renewing H1Bs because there's a limit on how many people from India can get a green card. So 80% of your immigration in the United States is in H1B is Indian tech worker. And then that person gets renewed and that person becomes critical to the operations of a company. They don't want to lose them. Suddenly they were not renewing H1Bs. So I started a company called Code in Canada. And I was basically offering to hire those H1Bs, sponsor their visa in Canada, and contract them back to the US. So it's just like they moved from, the South Bay to Minnesota, like no sweat. And then I started a recruiting company out of that. And then I was bringing in people from all over the world, from South Africa, from Ukraine, from everywhere, and feeding the Canadian ecosystem with engineers. And then COVID happened, wiped out. Yeah.
Yeah.
So nobody was coming to Canada. And I went, well, I got to figure something out. And guess what? Remote became okay thanks to COVID. So I didn't need to bring anybody into the country. And the problem that I'd had every time I built a company, I'd hit an inflection point where I needed to outsource. And I had this problem. I didn't know where to start and where it ends. I mean, nobody has a process. People have great hiring processes. Outsourcing, you do it once or twice, you don't really have a good process. You don't have good data because you don't have any time. So you're dealing with a very small set. Your chances of failure are statistically about 39%. And another 20% are not failures, but they just push through, like I described before. So I decided to build a database of who's good at what. And using starting off with the network that I had around the world who were sourcers for our recruiting business, I said, what's a really good dev shop there? And tell me more about it. And first mistake people make when they actually do talk to a dev shop, they say, hey, this is my problem. Can you fix it? Every one of them will say yes, no matter what. Some of them can, but you don't know who. And so what I decided to ask was a really simple question that would sort of filter out what they were really good at from more of an integrity point of view. And it's basically, look, I represent North American companies who are looking for outsourcing. If I brought you the perfect customer, what business would it be in? Oh, we do marketplaces. Oh, we do media tech. Oh, we do health tech, And then what aspect of that do you do, right? I said marketplaces in, B2C or B2B? Is it B2B in logistics? What, these kinds of things. So we drill down. And now I know that they've got the project experience in that domain that if I bring a client to them, they probably know the business better than my client who might be a first-time entrepreneur in that business domain, right? So they're contributing to what they should and should not build. And then, of course, there's the data, how big is their bench strength in the tech stack? So that if we bring them 5 engineers from that company, one of them might not work out, might have slipped through the interview process, not saying a lot, and ends up being very sensitive to criticism or anything on a personal or definitely not a technical basis, because we vet based on the CVs, but from a personality and communication style, these are the things we try and flush out. That's probably the biggest reason things fail, is communication styles, understanding each other and how you talk and with the nuance of what you say. What does complete mean to someone might mean something completely different to someone else. No pun intended. So, so that's kind of what we did, and we figured out who's good at what and what tech stack, and then that's just a first level due diligence. And then if they get shortlisted, we go through who they've got at the time, and then we shortlist down to that to who's got the best cultural fit to my client. Their work style, their communication style, and all that stuff.
It's really cool. Oh, sorry.
So 98% success rate versus like a 39% is pretty good. That happens fast.
This is exactly coming back to even how we started this conversation about your interest in communication and how important that was to you, to how you see it such a pivotal piece of what Outforce is doing as a mission, right? Is, look, you can find technically competent people everywhere, and no amount of Scrum or product owner trying to tap into things and sort of wrangle people together is going to solve a fundamental issue, which is a communication issue, right?
Exactly.
Especially when there's technical debt involved and people have to try to figure out how to solve all of that while still moving forward, because money is being spent every day, right? So I think it's really awesome that part of the cornerstone of what Outforce is doing is ensuring that there is that fit of what does it mean when someone says, I want this done. Have they taken into account, is this person a perfectionist? How does that look in the real world playing out? When you tell someone, I want this done.
Overbuilding, scope creep, and all those things can go on. Yeah, but I thought you wanted this too. No, actually, I just needed this for this deadline. Thanks very much.
Yeah.
It's
like we're
not done.
literally just doing this sprints, right? So you want this whole thing complete? No. So a lot of that, I think, is so important because most people aren't really good at delegating in general, right? Just by default, especially entrepreneurs who, let's face it, go-getters, often the first ones to be like, I'll do it myself, right? So there's already that bottleneck in most businesses anyways, with most founders. I imagine you run into this a lot, just working and mentoring.
Oh yeah, I'm not going to waste time on these guys. I'm going to go do it myself. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So then you compound that problem with outsourcing and bringing in people who aren't originally part of your company or what have you. And even internally, that's a problem. So you can
might
just
be a second language.
Yeah. Right? So I just want to really highlight how important it is that what you've decided to include as part of your solution to a problem is the communication styles. That itself is a huge value prop. And I'm so curious about how you thought to ask that versus what most people ask, which you're right. No one's going to turn away business. Can you solve this? Yes. Yeah. And then what, and when do you need it by, right? But the fact that you turn the question on its head, I want to get to the DNA of that, because I feel like that in itself, and this may be an impossible task just because it's who you are, right? And maybe we can just learn about what makes you the kind of person that can ask that question, right? Is there, if you were to contemplate on it, because I think this is where the real juice is going to be. We already know Outforce is awesome, by the way, just by listening to what you said, okay? So the question is, if you had to think about it for a second, is it because of your investment in communication that you also work hard to know exactly what you're asking people?
It's a really good question. I'm not sure where it comes from, but I look for efficiency, right? I mean, we try and get all that done in a couple, 3 weeks, right? And so you don't have a lot of time to ask a lot of questions. So you need to ask the questions that are going to get you the best answer. I met the founder of Plenty of Fish, which was sold to Match.com.
Yeah.
And I had the luxury of asking him, hey, I said, we're kind of in the dating business too, right? Like we're finding companies that are matching for our client. And I said, what are the top 3 things you learned from from running this business, and he sold it for like 900 million, and he didn't get funding or anything. He sold it for 900 million in his pocket. So it was amazing. He said, number one is it's not matching. It's not matching that makes the difference, right? So if you get to 90% fit, that's good enough. People will come back for more, right? So in our case, that kind of a question gets us to about 65, 70%. And then the other 30 is who they've got in their team that's available that week. Because like I said, good companies are booked out. So you need to know that they've got a good team. And we usually get, by the end of the day, we start with a massive database. So we usually get, by the time we're down to the last five, 2 or 3 companies where the whole team is just coming off a project where they built something very similar. So you got 1 + 1 = 2 equals 5 with engineering, right? If you got 2 people who work together, their productivity are a lot greater than just one-on-one. So you get this magic of that team that just came off. They know exactly what you're building. They're in the tech stack, and they work together, and they finish each other's sentences. Boom, you've got a rocket. That's phenomenal. But it's how they communicate with each other and with you, right? So what I tend to ask, and by the way, I have all of these secrets in a book that somebody told me we should sell, but I give it away at our website because I don't want anyone to waste any time. And I'm happy to give all the ways we do these questions. But as an example, in a coding experiment, one of the questions we ask is, so what did you learn in the last 6 months that changed the way you write software? And I look for the answer, right? Well, if there's no answer, then okay, you're not a continuous learner. We want continuous learners. If they answer, they can articulate, and they can articulate it well. I know they're a good communicator, right? So that's just one question that gets you 2 answers. Another one is to the company itself. So we all know you've done great work, and you'll send us a portfolio of all the great work you've done. Tell me what happened when shit hit the fan, because it always hits the fan. There's always going to be some glitch. And I look for their body language and the way they answer. And if they do give the right answer, which is generally about, we discuss things before they come up, their sprints, blah, 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 blah. Then I say, well, I'm going to talk to that client. So are they going to say exactly the same thing that you just said? And then I look for either the shit I didn't slide through my teeth, or the, yeah, go ahead, no problem. Then I know I'm dealing with honest people as well. So those are kind of the 3 areas that I probe to figure out what kind of a company they really are.
No, I'm big on this.
If your person they really are.
I'm big on this, man. And do you find that this is something that really started to take shape even in your own approach as an entrepreneur once you founded and launched Outforce? Or was this something that started to build and really become a part of who you were as an entrepreneur earlier on, maybe after your first or second company? There's no way it was the first company, right?
Yeah, well, no. When we were doing international recruit, the efficiency of questioning and filtering is paramount. I mean, like I said, we have 79,000 companies in our database.
Oh,
We can't
wow.
spend a lot of time on that first level due diligence. So finding the most efficient ways to get there, it was definitely an outcome of doing this business. And then prior to that, doing international recruiting, you drop a job opportunity into a hotspot like Istanbul, right? Like in Turkey, you have a lot of people exiting from hot, countries like Syria and Iran as examples. And so you have a lot of engineering capacity that is mobile in that country, which is a great place to recruit from as a result. But you have a lot of people who don't understand what engineering is. So you describe the software, the JD's all there, and then you get a mechanical engineer or an electrical engineer applying for the same job. So you have to have very efficient ways of filtering all that noise out. And the same thing now at scale with large companies, that all say they can do everything. You have to really quickly get to what is essential for your client. And I would say tech stack, and business domain are table stakes. The real secret sauce is in the interview process and finding out what their culture is like.
And that's a whole discussion in and of itself. Is there's this idea that we're expounding on about outsourcing and recruiting and bringing people in that capacity. right? And working with a company like Outforce
Mhm.
that's doing the work that's necessary. And then there are people who are just contemplating bringing in someone full time while they're trying to scale. And that in and of itself is a Herculean task. Do you have any stances or opinions on hiring versus outsourcing and what you should be doing when? How does that work based on your experience?
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think the best solution is to hire your own team, except for those times where you have elastic demand and you just don't, it's going to be a 6 month or a 12-month effort, and you know that you're going to let them go. So it's funny because our sweet spot are companies that are more in the Series A, Series B category where they're really scaling up. But occasionally we'll work with an entrepreneur who's just starting. And we will do that because you do not like if you've read Colin's book on the people on the bus and how to make sure that they're very flexible. The people, like I said at the beginning, the people who you work with at the beginning might not be the people you want as you scale. And certainly before you go and give 30% of the company to your engineering partner because that's the guy from computer science class who you really liked and thought you would get along with and start this great company. You might want to rethink that and think with AI and Copilot and all these other tools you can use to quickly build anything, speed is the most important thing. And your go to market strategy is probably as important, if not more important, than your technology strategy. And in fact, the product, as I said before, products are pretty, it's very hard for people to distinguish the incremental benefit of one product against another. Marketing helps that, go to market helps that. So what you really want to make sure is whatever your idea is, which you think is unique, you need to make sure it has product market fit. And inevitably, when you, like we did, when we launched a product, and I've done this many times, oh no, it's over here, not exactly where I thought it was. And so you need to totally rebuild to what the market wants. Do you want to hire all that engineering expertise to go into one direction and find out you got to pivot to the next? No, you should get your product market fit. Then you've actually got a better story to tell to hire the engineers that you want on a full-time basis. And then, but even that, you get product market fit, you get with a quick build and company, and again, a company that knows the space, the domain really well, is going to build you something that makes a lot of sense for what you're trying to do, right? You may have ideas, but they will know nuances. And then you get product market fit, you start clamping in, you start replacing that sort of early team of contractors with your own team as your core engineering team. But then anything that's sort of extraneous to that, you let contractors do that because that's a waste of your time to spend all the time hiring somebody and then kicking them out. And if you need to scale, you want to build us just in terms of scaling and time to hire a good pod of engineers that are cross-functional. Let's say it's 5 or 7 people. You hire your senior person, that's 3 months, 2 months to onboard them. And then that person's increment is going to be hiring their engineers, junior, front end, senior, whatever it is. That's probably another couple months. You could be into 9 to 12 months before you get a cross-functional engineering team. You think about that, right? And if speed is critical, we could get a company, the same engineering team that actually has built many of what they're building and has all the expertise in 3 weeks, and they hit the ground running. Think of all the product you can build. You're still going to hire those teams, and as I said, peel them back as you build. And 90% of the time, they go in a parallel path. This is my engineering team for all this other stuff, and this is the engineering team I hire for my core. But I can build product way faster, get it to market, figure out what works. Speed is, I would say, the magnet that not only brings you first customers, it brings you first money, it brings you first mover advantage, and all those things bring you great talent.
Yeah.
So that's what outsourcing offers is speed and expertise. And
And
that's when you should use it. But, you know, some people just want to build their team and I understand why. And I did the same thing myself. So there's advantages and disadvantages to both.
Right. And even then you ultimately say the goal is to have your own team internally. But it's like you said,
Or yeah,
where the elastic demand starts to take shape, it's where to take things into consideration like outsourcing.
right.
And I love that you're talking about this because you look at the current landscape of things and you see all these major companies, while it's not specifically engineering, but you see so many massive layoffs because people were focused on shareholder this or that. When honestly, if that is the case, how does a sort of elastic demand like that, like, we need to get the shareholders involved? Because while you work mostly with, Series A and Series B, there are some major companies out there that seem to make moves just a little differently, and then they get all this backlash on social media because they're laying off 40% of their workforce, and they can probably afford to do that. But the burn rate between 3 weeks and 9 months is massive in terms of how
Yeah.
you can iterate, get to where you want to go, not bleeding cash, especially when you're Series A and Series B, right? This is exactly what you're alluding to. Am I understanding this correctly?
Well, so good engineers anywhere around the world are not like the perception is, oh, outsourcing, that's India, and that's 10 cents on the dollar. Well, there is educational programs in India where Facebook, Google, and everybody are lined up at the door for the graduates, and they're signing in $250,000 checks just to finger paint in the office so they can get. I mean, so the perception that you can get cheap engineering geographically diverse is relatively true because there are lower costs of living in certain markets, but a really top engineer anywhere in the world is in demand anywhere in the world. Um, so burn is not the issue. And you ask any senior engineer worth their salt, it's not cost. If you can get an engineer that is twice as productive for then instead of getting five engineers that are not productive, poof, take the one, right? And that's kind of where people are more, they're happier to work with someone that is a mirror of themselves, and therefore that is generally geographically proximate to them, right? A Canadian or an American want to hire a Canadian or American. But once you start seeing what other people can do in other markets, and then they bring that other perspective. I mean, if you want to build a global company, you've got to have engineers around the world anyway. There's none of the big companies have never outsourced. They've all outsourced something. So it's not like it's not in the program. But yeah, like you can get a better rate in Argentina than you can in in the Bay, obviously. But what we really solve for is speed and quality. I call it what did I call it? The trilemma. Yeah. So it's a trilemma of you can pick two. You've got price, quality, or speed. And we solve for quality and speed. If you want, price comes based on the luck of the geography of that team that's available that is perfect for you. Um, and or that company that's perfect for you that will work with you. And so, yeah, so that's what we solve for.
Yeah, and anyone who succeeds in business knows that anytime you're focused on cost, it's a race to the bottom eventually, no matter what you're trying to do. If you're trying to do anything worth anything of merit, I mean, I think the only place that really comes into factoring is when you're doing manufacturing, because you have the goal has to be eventually to lower costs as much as possible as production scales. Uh,
Yeah.
but but otherwise,
Yeah, and there are ways to like you can hire junior engineers if you've got the patience and the people to mentor them and bring them into
right?
being great engineers. So if we call that farming, and that's a great way to go as well. And better than going and finding a junior engineer from a country where they hardly speak English and you're in a time zone difference. That's a disaster because you'll
Yeah,
end up rebuilding everything they built. So
yeah,
yeah, we go for quality and
speed and
and
speed.
speed, and then effective price is based on everyone's bidding against each other. So you go for whatever you like.
Well, look, Sean. First of all, you dropped a lot of bombs on us here. That really, I think, for anyone who was sleeping, they need to understand. This is a wake up call to really understand how fast are you trying to go and how great are you trying to be by the time you get there. You know what I mean?
Mm,
And
hmm.
that's really the fundamental. Excuse me. That's really where this conversation is going. And you're even offering. You say you have a book that you give away, I think for free, you said, on your
Yeah, it's
website.
called, yep, the definitive guide to outsourcing. It gives you all the tips to do it on your own, which you're welcome to do. We also have a free tool on our website, which is basically the redacted database. So you can filter, you can just see what kind of outcomes you can get just by picking domain, time zone, all that stuff. And then if you want the full 9 yards, we're at your service if you want to do it.
Right. And they just have to go to Outforce.ai and there's a sign up sheet and all that for that.
Yep, exactly. Yeah.
Right on. Well, outside of that, is there anything else while you have the people's attention, Sean?
Yeah.
Is there
Well,
anything
I
else?
go for it. Nothing gets made without risk. Yeah, I'd say the only thing we talked a lot about culture. I think one of the things that is interesting is if you are going to work in another country with a company with a team from another country, it's worthwhile investigating what are the social norms of those countries so that and we call that outcome expectation. So, just an example, well, this happened for us a lot when I brought people in from other parts of the world. You bring somebody in from a country that is everything's negotiable, and then suddenly they're at Walmart and nothing's negotiable, right? That just creates there's a neuropathy of that. So the neurons are expecting that you can go to the counter and negotiate the price for that T-shirt, and suddenly, boom, it hits a wall. So it creates white noise in the head, which reduces productivity in other areas. Just sitting down on a subway seat versus standing up. What is the social norm? Having a coffee. What do you talk about on a coffee with someone from India or from Southeast Asia before you talk about business? In North America, we have 5 minutes of hey, with and then boom, straight into business, and then the follow-up email, and away you go. No, you have to get through 3 conversations and maybe even get invited to dinner with grandma before you can start talking business in some parts of the world. Hierarchical societies versus non-hierarchical societies and their deference to decision making, right? Like you run a sprint and you got a bunch of people from Southeast Asia, which is hierarchical, and they're not going to question the boss. You have to know that and get them to speak up and make them feel safe about making mistakes, which is not acceptable in some countries. All these things are nuances that we look at when we look at cultural differences and whether the company's ready for something like that or not. And we direct them to companies that are more suitable.
I have a literal direct experience of what you're talking about.
Oh, yeah?
I had been contracted to do fractional marketing for a company based out of Singapore that raised, I think, Series C at that point,
Okay.
with a venture capital firm. And I'm sitting in the meeting and they're asking, like, does anyone have any questions? And I seem to be the only person that consistently had questions. Most of the
Yeah.
team was based in Singapore, and they're all
Yeah.
very smart, very capable people, often agreed with me when I would bring things up before getting to the meeting. And yet
Yeah.
no one ever asked any questions. I started to feel like I was sticking out and I was ruffling feathers. And, while that was a short contract, mostly just because that's all they really needed, when I reflect on it, it never left me that I really was the only one asking questions, which was really unusual because, as you know, in
That's right.
America, everyone has the audacity
That
to
guy
say
doesn't know what he's talking about.
Yeah, so I love that you bring that up because wow, that's got to be the next book that's downloadable. Some kind
That's
of, you
right.
know what I mean? It's such a
Yeah.
valid thing to bring up. Listen, man, I had a really great time talking to you, and I can really feel the experience come through when I hear you speak. I'm
Thank you,
very
Phil.
grateful. I want to reiterate for those who are listening, Outforce.ai is really
Mhm.
where you want to go. Get all the good stuff. You can find Sean online. Are you open to people reaching out or connecting with you on
Oh, yeah,
LinkedIn at
definitely
all?
on LinkedIn.
Okay,
Yeah.
and it's
Yeah.
Sean Languedoc. Is
It's
that correct?
pronounced, well, it's Languedoc, which is a handful of a French word. It's a province in southern France. And Sean is Irish, so it's Sean. Bad combo, eh? Wine and beer.
That's how you get the party started, Sean.
Yeah. So yeah, look at Outforce.ai. You'll see me on the about page, and if you can hook up with me on LinkedIn, that's great too.
Right on, man. Thank you for stopping by.
Okay. Thank you, Philip. Been great.